Hello, welcome back to the League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism, where we attempt to apply logic and reason to religion and politics when we can. First off, what we are not applying logic and reason to, if you saw the previous thumbnail, it is the China conflict, because we don't quite know what's going on yet. There's not a lot of good sources out right now. We know that it's over trade, and it's kind of over territory a little bit as well right now, because the Chinese have water space, and we're not respecting it, or they're not supposed to have it. We're really not sure yet, so we're going to get back on that. We'll probably start on that next week, so everyone knows. But if you saw the thumbnail and wondering why we're not talking about it, it's because we just don't know enough about it yet, and we don't want to just bullshit you. So that's that. So the first thing that's up is we had to give it its own topic because I was just too goddamn excited. Kamala Harris dropped out of the race, which is so surprising because, well, not to sound immodest, but she's a top-tier candidate. Yes. What she said right before she dropped out of being a top-tier candidate. So yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. I'm so excited that she is not in the race anymore. And for anyone who doesn't know why, it's because her policies are shit. She was for Medicare for all, and then she backed off of it. And then that's pretty much what she's been on, like, every topic. You can't quite nail her down on what she believes in, because she just kind of goes with whatever her campaign's telling her to do. It seems like it's quite bullshit. And if you want to be president, you should firmly know what your policies are going to be. If you're going to be like the lead politician, whatever, right? So she's gone. It's hilarious. Christy, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I remember her sitting there just clutching her pearls. She couldn't believe, the audacity that people had, the things they said about her, how they challenged her, because she was a first tier candidate. And to me, this just nails home. This just brings home the fact that not just progressives, Americans don't. Your only, like, part of this game was you were going to prosecute Trump. Fantastic. Like, that's great. Go do that over there, where that's where you could do. Here we're talking about a president. Show us what you stand for, what you're willing to fight for. And I mean, the feeling I got from anybody that I talked to about Harris was, she's a prosecutor. She's the police. She doesn't see things the way we do. And that's how I felt too. I didn't feel that she was genuine as far as the position of president is the biggest civil servant you could be. You represent this nation of democratic people. And I don't think that she saw it like that. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's just how I felt. I'm glad. Same thing. I was like, well, another one bites the dust. But now we have Bloomberg, which, what? Why? No. He shows me that there's so much wrong. You can just come in because you have $56 billion. You can just.
Yeah, for a lot of people, they're going to see this as like, oh, thank goodness, a rich man is using his money in a good way, funding his own campaign. But they're not going to see the oligarchy in it. Right, and as far as the Kamala Harris thing goes, I agree. I feel like she doesn't see anything like with the people. She's too caught up in world of politicians and law enforcement. She's not really with the people, which is she's a prosecutor, which is sad because she represents the people. Congress is supposed to be the closest branch of government to the people. And she doesn't really represent
as a prosecutor, she prosecuted the people. So
so she was supposed to win that way.
I don't know. She put people in prison who have family members who are about to vote, and those family members go out and talk to people, and they've been very vocal, saying, you know, our loved one is in jail for things that are illegal now, like marijuana, and she was okay with putting people behind. She was fine with it. Her record, she had a very high rate of, you know, winning. That means she prosecuted the people and put the people behind the bars. So yeah, good riddance. You know, that at first I thought maybe she has some good ideas, and it's just that she's a really good prosecutor. So she, as you know, a jury member, but I'm not. I'm looking for a president, and she is not that.
No, she's not. She's not. She's just, she seems so fake, and it's so obvious. And her support's going down lower than Tulsi Gabbard's, which is so weird, right?
That made me laugh. That made me laugh.
It was so funny. So yeah. I want to throw out my prediction real quick. I think her support is going to go to Elizabeth Warren and to Pete Buttigieg.
Absolutely.
Because establishment is going to go towards Pete Buttigieg, and then anyone who wants a female candidate.
Right. Anybody that wants platitudes over policy.
Exactly.
Because that's all he is. He wants to rule with morals. That's his whole policy. That's not a policy though. I'm so sick of it. I want somebody that has policies, and Buttigieg is not one. And I agree. I think that a lot, if not half, close to half of Harris's will go to Buttigieg.
Yeah, I think so. He's definitely going to get a boost. It could really drop out Biden, but I think that's going to be great, because I think between Buttigieg and Bernie, I don't think Buttigieg is going to be able to swing it.
Nope. No. He doesn't have the black vote. He doesn't have the Hispanic vote. And those are, you can't, and call it identity politics, call it whatever you want. It's a fact that is a huge block of voters. And if you don't have that huge block, or at least some of them, you're not going to be president. And over Bernie, Buttigieg would not. Bernie would annihilate that. And then he would annihilate Trump.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's real populism versus fake populism.
Yeah.
Who's going to win? Because we already know where Trump stands on these issues. So
it's democratic rule versus tyranny.
Versus what?
Tyranny.
No, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, was there anything else about Kamala Harris that we wanted to touch on, go over?
Na 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 na. Hey.
Goodbye. Yeah.
I think that's it.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really excited that because this really helps. This really helps the candidates that we're more rooting for, like Bernie, like maybe Andrew, maybe Tulsi. Those three, I feel like, are probably the most viable for both of us.
Yes. I would like for all of them to get the same amount of time.
Yeah.
In a debate, all of them get 15 minutes. Period.
Right. And all Andrew shouldn't get shafted for half an hour straight.
Nope. And I would say that for people I don't agree with. I would say for the people that I would never vote for, and I think have nothing to add, everybody should get the same amount of time.
No, absolutely, they should. That's what what democracy would be for. So
it's American democracy, the game show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. I think the people are catching on to that, and you can see it with Kamala's support that she had before she dropped out. People don't like the platitudes.
Right.
People don't like the way she acted. And it looks like they're a little bit over the full-on identity politic train that she was trying to ride, which is really annoying and just super fucking disrespectful. That's one reason why I hate it so much. I would love a first female black president, especially someone like shoot, her name escapes me right now, who's like the lead for Bernie's campaign. If you can help me, Christy. She ran away. I'm sure someone in the live chat is going to be like, you mean this, you idiot? I'm like, yeah. But yeah, if you get the right person who like has the right policies, who actually you can trust, that would be amazing. But that's not Kamala Harris by any chance. And not just saying Warren. No, I was saying like first black female president, and she's not anything but white. I was asking about Bernie's right hand lady. What's her name?
Nina Turner.
Nina Turner. Yes, I think she would make a spectacular first black female president. I would love that. That'd be amazing. I just don't want.
I would love to see her in charge of something huge in Bernie's administration, like education. Or Warren in charge of education.
Housing and development. That'd be fine.
Or either one of them in charge of, Wall Street and big banks.
That'd be great.
Yes, yeah. I love me some Nina Turner.
Tulsi is the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, in charge of the military-industrial complex.
Yeah,
the Republicans would never let that happen.
No, they wouldn't.
And I don't think she has the experience to be in that department. Yeah. I mean, I would have to draw I prefer people to be smart and educated in the department that they're ahead of. So, like, nothing that we have now. I don't.
No.
Nerp.
Let's make you VP, because you're ready. All right. And as far as the, I see a quote of blue no matter who thing. I have a new thing, and I think I mentioned it once here, because I think the blue no matter who mentality is like kind of bullshit.
Yeah,
but
it's kind of cultish.
Yeah, it is kind of cultish.
That would be the same as red no matter what. Like, you would think, why would you do that? No.
It's stupid. No, it's stupid. But I would meet someone in the middle, at least for conversation's sake, of being like, okay, I'll agree with blue no matter who for Congress, not for president. I want a blue Congress. That's fine. But I mean, I'd rather have an independent in the Oval Office than a bullshit Democrat, or even like a half decent Republican. Doesn't matter. It matters what the policies are. So that's where I stand. You guys pretty much know that now. Okay, I think I'm gonna get going. I have guests. My wife's birthday was yesterday.
You have gas? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
A lot of cheese and cake, guys. I gotta go. So
you made me do it. You walked right into it. Just the French story.
I did.
Yes, because it's Lindsay's B-Day.
It is.
Born day.
Yes, it was yesterday, but we're celebrating more today because I worked all day yesterday. Thank you all for coming. I see we have like 19 viewers right now. That's amazing. That's awesome. I'm gonna hand the rest of the show over to Christy because I think she knows what she's doing.
I think I'm alone now.
She's gonna go over the true story of Thanksgiving and some really horrific shit, which is really good to look back on and reflect on. Christy's really, 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 really good at research and looking into this kind of stuff. So if you haven't heard one of her like scripted things that she like puts a lot of work into, please stay tuned, listen to what she has to say, because her shit's awesome. I'm going to be listening to it first thing in the morning. I'm very excited. I'm sorry I can't be here for the rest of it.
No.
But I love you guys. Thank you for coming. And Kamala Harris, aloha. And to the rest of you,
Pasta
aloha.
lasagna.
Stay humanist for God's sake. Love you guys. Christy, have a good night. Thanks, Master.
Have fun. Okay, guys. So, Thanksgiving, to me, growing up, I had a blast. I looked forward to it. I looked forward to the lessons we go over at school, the arts and crafts every kid make with the hand. You draw the hand, you make the turkey, the hats, the Plymouth hats made out of construction paper. I loved Thanksgiving. I still love Thanksgiving. I did the Hello, welcome back to League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism. I'm Christy, Santiago, and tonight we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving and the true story of Thanksgiving and a few other things. I want to end it with maybe a more modern, contemporary look at reservation life. But I'm sorry about that breakage we just had in the video. Tech shit happens. I don't know what else to say. Okay, so I don't know where it broke off, but it was talking about Thanksgiving and how much I loved it. And I do love Thanksgiving. But as you guys know, I have found a new love in research and just learning, just absorbing knowledge. And history has, I don't know if it's a passion. I think if there was a word that would be more than passion, that's what it is. I love history. I just can't get in. There are not enough days or hours or minutes in a day for me to absorb history. I love it more than every other topic. It's so fascinating to me. I think that if we were to decide as a people that we wanted just the fucking facts taught to our children, and we were willing to sit down and go through the mass amount of history textbooks and every bit of knowledge that we have and decide upon, here are the facts, children, that we know, and these are the things that we can corroborate, and these are the sources. I think that we would be such a different people, because I can't deny the fact that I'm such a different person today than I was just a little bit ago because of learning. I think of everything in this context of history, all the stuff that came before me, all the decisions that were made. I mean, it's like I said, if there was a word that was more than passion, that would be the word that I have for history. I want to start where we've all been to elementary school. If you're an American, you usually we're taught like a conventional story, about the meeting of pilgrims and Indians that finished with an amazing feast. There is much more to this legend. At the start of the 17th century, southern New England was home to many varieties of busy communities within several confederations, as they were called. These were the people of the first flight, and they called their home the Dawn Land. And these people of the first light had been trading with Europeans for over 100 years before the Pilgrims ever came. Relations soured only after deceitful Europeans had come later and kidnapped locals, mainly young girls and women, to sell, and slaves to sell as slaves or sex slaves, whatever they wanted. Permanent European settlements actually were impossible to become settlements due to the already highly populated native occupants. They had to either live with them, or there were just too many. It was occupied. It was occupied by the First Light people. But in 1616, a tradesman introduced disease. Of course, that is something that happens. I'm not saying that this was a bad person. It's just something that happens. But disease were introduced. The occupants perished in droves from the lack of immunity. 1616 to 1619, in just 3 years, up to 90% were wiped out in several of the native federalizations. This was called the Great Dying. So if you type in the Great Dying and start reading, if you're like me, it will just keep going. There's so much history there that we can learn from. We have documents from this time. I was able to read documents that were in French. I can't read French, of course, they're translated. Buying and selling of slaves. The French who came here to build colonies, the English who came here to build colonies, the natives that had their colonies. There was this trade. It was, we have so much. It was very fascinating. And I only, this much. There's mountains of information, and I look forward to reading more. But so far, we're going to enter Pilgrims. The Pilgrims were not actually called Pilgrims by their contemporaries. They were known as Separatists, a branch of the English Puritans. And King James, well, he fucking loathed the Separatists, or the Puritans, as we call them. He persecuted them. This all started in 1604, and we have all of the documentation to show this. So the Separatists fled to Holland, where they were free to worship as they saw fit. But because they feared losing their national culture and identity, their congregation wanted a new place to build and start their brand of church. They decided on North America. They asked King James for the rights to build a colony. They planned to make a profit catching fish, and they were going to pay off their debts to the investors of their future colony by fishing when they arrived in North America. The Mayflower set sail on September 6th. 2 months later, Cape Cod was spotted, and 16 men were sent to shore to inspect the area. Unfortunately, the settlers didn't know how to fish, so they scammed their way over to North America. I mean, seriously, I can make this stuff up. While this is all going on, the French had overpopulated prisons. And so they said to themselves, well, let's put them on ships and send them to the colonies. They sent them to Louisiana, their property, France's property. And so we have criminals. Some of them are probably in there for tax and things, that they weren't violent criminals. So this is a harsh punishment to them. But then there's the murderers and the people who have no conscience also coming over and being just dropped off to start life in this new land, which was occupied, by the way, by indigenous. And unfortunately, the settlers didn't know how to fish, and food was running out. So what we have on how they survived at that time was they resorted to robbing graves, robbing homes, and storage pits left behind by the Great Dying. So this is how they kept everybody alive. It was really harsh for them. They lost a lot of people also. There is, in this time, We have documentation of their first encounter with natives, but no one was killed. And this is what we know of the settlers, the separatists. It's a short document, and it just says that they had their first encounter and no one was killed. So on December 12th, they reached New Plymouth. They did not land on any specific rock, though folklore says that such things. I know I was raised, my brother and sister was raised to, Plymouth Rock. They landed on a rock. And I envisioned as a child, as I'm sure many do, this, I don't know, kind of like epic story. Construction on this colony began in January. By winter's end, 44 settlers will have died from horrible conditions such as a harsh winter, gangrene, toes falling off from frostbite, starving to death, getting sick, and there's nothing. There's nothing. You have to go there, fell wood, hopefully there's food to forage. It was scary times. In March, they were surprised when a man named Samoset greeted them in English. He told them that they were on top of a village whose residents had all passed on from the Great Dying. It had belonged to the Wampanoag, and their great chief, who had died, was watching over them. So he was pretty much giving them their blessing in perfect English. The settlers were eager to trade, so 5 days later, what we have for information, it shows that Samoset returned with furs and companions, including Tisquantum, known famously as Squanto, and he came to tell them in perfect English, quote, that the tribes had arrived. After years of dealing with Englishmen, over 100 years before they got there, the local tribes, they were fucking weary. They didn't trust, girls and women started going missing and becoming slaves, and they did not trust these newcomers. So the documentation that we have for this is, they're saying, hey, the tribes have come, and there's literally tribes everywhere surrounding them. And I know that would probably be really scary. I would be scared. Anybody would be scared. You have shovels and pitchforks and there's lots of people, thousands of tribes. It would be pretty scary. So this is all documented because it was such a significant event. Edward Winslow, a separatist and third governor of New Plymouth, was sent to be a hostage and declared the settlers' peaceful intentions to the indigenous peoples. Satisfied, the chiefs walked into New Plymouth, and they were all warmly and regally greeted by the pilgrims, is what it says, verbatim. A peace treaty was created ensuring mutual protections if either is attacked by enemies. They will, as we have treaties today, this is an ally. If you attack our ally, we'll step in and help. Well, this is what was written up between the local natives and these settlers. With the help of Squanto, New Plymouth settlers began to fare better. He taught them how to grow crops and was absolutely vital as an interpreter. To the separatists, he was a gift from God, is what they wrote. But in fact, Squanto had been kidnapped in 1614 and shipped to Spain to be sold into slavery. Squanto ended up in London at the home of a merchant who taught him English and arranged for Squanto's return to the Dawnland in 1619. But Patuxet, it's Patuxet, Patuxet, the name of the town where Squanto came from, which was New Plymouth, was completely empty and wiped away from the Great Dying. So there was nobody there for him once he got back from being sold into slavery. I mean, he's fortunate that he ended up at somebody who was empathetic and wasn't going to, I don't know if he was a good guy. I can just go by the actions that we have documented. So I don't know if he did other things that were bad. I don't know. But what I do know is that he did teach him English, which was, that wouldn't have happened here in the States. And he was educated and sent home to be with his people. So he's very rare. Most people who were taken did not return home. So Squanto, he was well traveled. For the time, we have a native who could speak English and has traveled and is educated. And, he comes home and everybody that he ever knew is gone. Nearby tribes did take him in with suspicion because of his years abroad. They didn't know this had never happened. All his people were gone and they were suspicious. But they needed a translator to parley with the newcomers for trade. They eventually sent their best warrior to live among the settlers and to keep an eye on Squanto. And this documentation that we have on this is, it's blatant. He was sent there to keep an eye on Squanto. By fall, the settlers had a bountiful harvest and a feast was held to celebrate. Massasoit tribe showed up with 90 warriors. We have documented, and 5 deer for the meal. So this was, they were sharing. They were coming saying, we have warriors and we have food. For 3 days, the English and the tribesmen ate and entertained one another. This is the famous first Thanksgiving that children learn about in grade school. However, the word Thanksgiving would not have been used by these settlers to describe a harvest feast. For Puritans, a day of Thanksgiving was a day of fasting while giving thanks to their Lord and Savior in prayer. But the story of Pilgrims and Indian does not end here. During New Plymouth's first year, Squanto had been up to something. He realizes that he's got a substantial power, is kind of how I see it. He is the only English speaker of his people. He conceives a plan to overthrow the Massasoit. He persuaded locals that he could command the English language to make war or peace at his will. The great warrior that was sent to watch over Squanto, he did grow suspicious, and on or near March 1622, he warned the governor of Squanto's plan. So he had been watching him closely and making sure that on this day he did this, and he kind of put the puzzle together. And so we have a good look at what was happening, which I just find so fascinating. It's almost like being there, and then I have dreams about it. I don't know. I know, I'm a nerd. But soon enough, the tribes had discovered Squanto's plot. They were furious. He was going to overthrow the Massasoit, and they weren't going to let that just, be. They had demanded that Squanto be handed over for a swift execution. The governor refused. He told them no way, saying that the interpreter was too valuable to them to give up. But according to the treaty signed by both sides, Squanto's life belonged in the hands of the tribe. So the governor finally conceded, as legally he had to, or there would have been, they were outnumbered, so he had to. And as he was about to hand over Squanto, an unidentified ship appeared. So that's where that documentation ends. And so I did, it did cause alarm, it was really hard to put this together, but it is the same boat. So, in another place, I found that this boat had caused so much alarm that it had delayed the governor Bradford, which that's how I know this, because it is the governor up above. And that Governor Bradford demanded more time, and the tribesmen became angered and impatient, and they began to leave without Squanto. So I was like, it's the same. The ship carried 60 Englishmen, this unidentified ship. And these Englishmen had planned to build a colony near Boston. They abused the current inhabitants of the area. And when I say abuse, I mean the most horrendous things you can fucking think of. It's disgusting. They initiated a conspiracy to kill the colonists throughout the tribes. Any kind of trouble that they could make, they made. It was almost like these people came over to loot and be bad. Just they weren't the first colonists who were trying to trade and thought Squanto was, he was too much of a gift from God. So after they initiated a conspiracy to kill the colonists throughout the tribes, the higher ups were warned about the plot, and New Plymouth leaders launched a preemptive strike. So, you can see where this is going. They did this preemptive strike to save their fellow Englishmen. So even though these new Englishmen started this plot, it made the older colony do a preemptive strike on the natives to stick with their original, with its tribalism at its bare minimum. It's disgusting. It did bring peace for a time, though. In that time, the Great Migration of 1620 to 1640. So if you're interested in this time, you literally type in the Great Migration of 1620 to 1640. And because you're already in the States, it will pull up this information here. I'm not sure if you're somewhere else, you might have to type in afterwards North America. More Puritans and settlers arrived. They soon outnumbered the natives, which now any treaty that they had, they couldn't make the Puritans stand to it because they were just outnumbered. With the great dying, over 90% of them died. They perished. So, and while the Pilgrims Treaty with Massasoit and the New Plymouth colony, all this happened from 1621 to 1660. Now, their fanatic during the 1621 to 1660, so many Englishmen, Frenchmen, so many were pouring in that no Puritans were concerned with any alliances. There's none of them held. They would be signed to get them to do what they wanted, to bend them to their will. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's one that I didn't find, but I didn't find any that they stood to during that time. Their fanatic religious principles ensured that no peace whatsoever between the two cultures could ever last. They were dirty savages, and they were blessed Christians. To Puritans, Native Americans were the other. They were wild and savage and godless. With such an ideology, the outcome was inevitable, as we know. They left England because they were persecuted. And then they bring their white asses here and persecute other people. It's when I see a mom grab their child by the arm and say, "Stop hitting your brother." It's the same dumbass mentality that I'm so sick of. Okay, I'm done ranting. Get back to my story. If these natives did not convert to this particular brand of Christianity, their Christianity, and surrender their cultural identity, they had to be eliminated. And we have documentation that, the Vatican, which ruled much of the world for centuries before this, put out a proclamation that if white Christians were conquering a land where there weren't any Christians, the Christians could take whatever they want. If they were conquering a land where there were Christians, they weren't to do that to the Christians. It was only to spread. You could dominate and murder to spread Christianity. So I know it's disgusting, but this is the way that it was, and it shows you how far we've come. The first Thanksgiving was a brief moment of harmony. It was between two worlds. It lasted 3 days, and who knows if those particular ships didn't show up right at that moment, what would have been. And I have thought about that. Not that it changes anything, but to me, that shows that there is good. There are these many people would choose to do the right thing. I live in a state where we have hurricanes, and it's amazing how when a hurricane is showing on the radar that it is coming here, how all of us are outside, passing out tape and put a check on your door. So if something happens, emergency services know that there are people inside, and everybody's helping everybody. We don't know each other. We pass each other all the time without saying a word, but it's people just do the right thing. And it's really sad the way that this went down. And for me to be able to find so much about this time that I didn't know about. I didn't know that we have I mean, day by day journals, and there's so much. I wish that everybody could love history like me, so I could have people to talk to, and I didn't sound like such a nerd. But sadly, this was short-lived. The capitalist opportunities that their Dawnland, this beautiful, pristine, indigenous country, presented, combined with zealous, dogmatic Puritan beliefs, were incentive enough to completely annihilate and wipe away the native inhabitants of many tribes. There is nothing wrong with sharing a feast of thanks with family and loved ones. I mean, I do that. I love Thanksgiving. But I would like you guys to remember the true events that started this American holiday and not the legend of tall tales. And I wanted to end it with a look at tribal life today. And so there's good and bad. So it's not going to be as sad as the rape and pillage of the first story. But I think that it's important. Like, I love history. I love people. And I only do this podcast because I can't not do it. I have to do it. It's something that I have to do. I can't just, say I know these things to be true, and it's sad that other people don't, and not try to at least share. So once the Sioux tribe, which I was born in Sioux City, Iowa, once the Sioux tribe roamed the Great Plains, but after generations of war with the U.S. government and decades of broken agreements and promises and treaties, they are left here on the place they call the Rez, R-E-Z, in the heart of the wealthiest nation in the history of the planet. Many of the Lakota live in striking poverty, struggling with addictions, drugs, and alcohol alike, and many preventable illnesses, with babies, mortality of births. That's something that first world nations just shouldn't deal with or shouldn't have a problem. But right here in this country, native births are over 3 times more likely to die. And that's because many hospitals are at least 100 miles away from the reservation. It's just, how did we let this happen? I didn't let it happen. I wasn't paying attention. So that means that I am responsible, and I have to say something. I do want to mention that something is changing on this reservation. There's a lot of good things going on. It was very heartwarming to read about. One young native says, and I quote, "They tried to bury us, but we are like seeds. They just didn't realize it. They buried us, but we are growing back stronger and better," end quote. People on the res are fed up with the bad name they've gotten, and there's a new story they want to tell. A story about protecting their ancient traditions, that human life is much more important than greed. A new generation of tribal activism and activists are fighting to stop billion-dollar pipelines all over the Americas. And young natives are rediscovering their histories and making headlines in art and music and hip hop. I mean, you guys check out A Tribe Called Red. I'm obsessed. It's so good. Life on the res is a combination of modern American culture and native traditions. I think that is rad. Many teenagers on Pine Ridge Reservation drop out of school, and only a tiny number of students go on to college. But a few of the res's high schools want to change that, and Little Wound High School is one of them. Little Wound High School might just look like any other high school in the Midwest, but Little Wound feels that it has a sacred mission to teach the next generation what it means to be Lakota. Pine Ridge is home to a minimum of 40,000 indigenous peoples. But there are 0 big businesses, 0 corporations. There are no fresh fruits or vegetables. It's mostly processed food at gas station-like markets. Let's see. Unemployment there is between 80 and 90% all the time. Right now, it's over 90%. I can't imagine living in a world, in a country, in a state, in a city where unemployment was 90%. Obviously, our government would do something about it. Obviously, there would be programs sent in. It wouldn't be allowed. the whole country would crumble if we let that happen to our cities. So it's curious that it only happens here. The res has its own borders, it's true, and its own president and a tribal council, but it's U.S. government cash that keeps the place running, or just barely running. It's hard for many tribes people to move on from decades and decades of discrimination when they feel history keeps repeating itself and there's no way out. Just a short while ago, on the neighboring Standing Rock Reservation, you guys will all remember, there was a standoff between mainly Native American protesters and a militarized police force defending $1 billion pipeline. Most natives know that this pipeline will pollute their water, their supplies, their lands, their sacred burial grounds, their prayer grounds, while destroying ancient burial grounds at the same time. The oil companies say that the pipeline is safe and environmentally friendly and economically important for the U.S. and blah, 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 blah. This continent-wide issue has only fired up the tribes, and I mean fucking all of them. Hundreds of tribes and thousands of people and nearly 200 demonstrators were arrested at the Dapple protests alone. These water protectors, as they're called, at Little Wound High, the pipeline has stayed a hot topic even today. They often bring up how the Bundy Ranch protesters, you guys should look that up, all had weapons, big weapons, and none were arrested or charged. But the native protesters protecting their own lands get pepper sprayed, water cannoned, and arrested and charged, with many facing years and years behind federal bars. And these beautiful native, these kids, they're considering that the closest shopping mall to this reservation is over 100 miles away. I was a teenager. I don't know. That's just something else. There's 40,000 people here. So, and I'm not saying that consumerism is the answer. I'm just putting it in perspective. You know, I could get to a mall if I left right now. I could be at a mall, inside the mall, parked and everything in 11 minutes, 12 minutes. So on the res, there's not much to do, as you could think. Alcohol and drugs are always going to be a massive problem when you have poverty. It's just the way that it goes. So most reservations are problem-ridden with drugs and alcohol. Pine Ridge, where 50% of the residents live below the poverty line. So you got 90% unemployment, 50% below poverty line. Life expectancy, get this, 52 fucking years old. I don't know how, I'm so outraged. These are our brothers and sisters. These are my brothers and sisters. This is unacceptable. And if regular people don't stand up for them, you know, in the civil rights, we're all colors fighting for the right. When women wanted the right to vote, there were men and women fighting for the right to vote. We have to stand together. Solidarity is the only way. If you think back to the Dapple project, the protests, Obama didn't stand up and grow a pair of balls until the veterans started showing up. When the veterans started showing up, he was like, okay, we can't have vets getting pepper sprayed on TV. Cut it, cut. The youngest meth user that I found to overdose on Pine Ridge Res was 10 years old. And, you know, there could be the argument, well, that's his parents' spot and that's their responsibility. But I want to live in a world where we all care. But it takes a village, you know. Many grade school children talk about how sad and drunk they've seen many of their family members become daily. These reservations were created generations ago. They have helped create these cycles of poverty and despair, handed down through the families. With no jobs to be had, the cycle continues. But I do not want to make this particular story about the tremendously difficult lives that our beautiful Indigenous brothers and sisters in America go through every single day in this country. More so, I prefer to write about hope. There is new hope, a wonderful gathering of the country's tribes for the first time in this country's entire history. And there's new hope in the Pine Ridge education system too. Tribal schools believe that education and a revival of Lakota ways can break the cycle of poverty and crime on the reservation. teaching these beautiful young faces and minds who they are, who they come from, their identity, how their people have lived on this land for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's beautiful, right? I love that. Without their identity, they've been lost. And I can see that. That makes sense. You know, we have so much documentation of white businessmen and leaders in the government saying, kill the native, save the man, which they meant, you know, take the children out of the house, put them in these boarding schools, cut their hair. If they talk in their native tongue, you beat them. They're only allowed to talk in English, and you teach them to be God-fearing people. Teach them that their ways are wrong, and if they want to go to heaven and not get beat every day, then they have to go this way. They changed their names. They took everything about their culture and their ties to this land of thousands and thousands of years and just annihilated it. So yeah, their identity, that makes total sense to me. And it's not just tradition the school teaches, like hunting and Lakota language and history. The school is helping students prepare for college and life inside and outside the res. So students are learning how their ancestors would have prepared for winter, hunting buffalo, and regular tribal care at school. And I love that the Lakota language is going to be taught because, I mean, duh. If you're descendant from Spanish or Portugal, you speak Spanish or Portuguese. If you're German, you speak German. I don't see this as duh. It's so blatant how this should obviously be taught. It's one of the American languages, and we wouldn't have won World War I without the Cherokee being able to, you know, talk in their language, which was only theirs. That's how we. There's so much history, and there's so much to be thankful for when it comes to what Native cultures have given us. And I don't think that them asking to reunite with their identity is anything but a duh. Like, obviously something that should be encouraged and funded. I agree. I don't think anybody with a heart would mind that their tax funds go to helping fund this. Let's see. The U.S. government, I found out, banned Lakota religious ceremonies. So get this, America. America is where religious freedom is found. You know, you come here because we have freedom of religion. However, unless, asterisk, you're Native. So the U.S. government banned Lakota religious ceremonies from 1888, 1888, to 1978, y'all. 1978. God. Can you imagine? That's persecution, Christians. That's what that looks like. Almost 100 years without being able to do any of your people's prayers, your dances, your ceremonies. No sun dances, no sweats, no native religion, no ghost dances. Like, I just... Oh, we had Navajo. Thank you, Purple. You are correct. It was the Navajo. The U.S. government said, or used they are gathering to become rebellious against the U.S. government. We cannot allow them to gather in these ways line. So much for America's freedom of religion, eh? And suicide rates in Pine Ridge sit 4 times higher than the U.S. average. And I want to end it with something to think about. What I found is before Christianity arrived in America, being gay or transgender was actually an accepted part of Native or Indigenous daily life. Men who believed themselves to be women or even just chose that role, or women who believed themselves to be men or just chose that role. It didn't even matter to them. They were considered sacred, actually, which kind of, I'm like, wait, what? And they were accepted by their tribe and given roles accordingly. So if there was a male who transgendered into male or just was born female and said, that's not who I am at all, and decided, like, this is who I am, I'm a man, that was his role. That was as simple as it was. And that he was more sacred almost, or if it was a she, more sacred almost, because they were given both. They had more to offer because of the role that they chose. It's hard to understand exactly. I mean, I haven't been able to talk to any of them. This is a long time ago, but from what we have from churches or government officials writing that about the natives, like they don't see sodomy as a problem. They don't see two women raising a children. They were just appalled at how savage they were. And then we have documents from the other side that have survived, which are not as many. And I was surprised to see that that they were considered sacred. You know, accepted, I can actually see that. I can see that. But considered sacred, I think about that, and then I think about, you know, they have this community of people where it was matriarchal. So if a woman has a lover and they have children and she decides she doesn't want to be with him, or they decide that they're egalitarian, didn't want to be with each other and she wanted to be with someone else, that child was still raised by everyone. It was the tribe's child. It was one of ours. And I like that. I really like that. I think that that is beautiful. And to live this way for, I mean, thousands and thousands of years, and then to have people come over and enslave you. I mean, we know the story. We know the real Thanksgiving story now. It's just, you know, we weren't there. I hate the argument that, you know, well, I haven't had any slaves, or I wasn't there and I didn't do these things. I know that, obviously, but it's good to read about them and try to understand the thinking on both sides. It's really hard for me to understand the thinking from the conquering side, but I do try to understand that, you know, what if it was just, that's the way it was, like Vikings, you know, they believed the only way to die a glorified death was in battle with an axe in your head, you know. So these are just different times, and I do try to understand that. But I also know that in this time, in the 1700s, and especially the middle to late, we knew these things to be wrong and still did them. And as an American, maybe it won't mean anything, but I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, and that sucks. And I loved what I learned from researching all this. I love all the extra stuff that I couldn't even fit in here. It was a lot, and it made me super thankful that we have so much knowledge at our disposal that we can learn from. And I wanted to also tell everybody that I'm thankful that I get to do this every week. I'm thankful for Nacha Witness, who is my Lord and Savior, because this would not come to you guys without him. If it did, it would be janky as fuck, and it would probably cut out. And I'm thankful for Mac and Lindsay, and for my computer. That's amazing. And everybody that helped me achieve that. And I'm thankful for Brant. He is my sweet, sweet friend. Yes, I don't know. I just talk to him every day. He makes me smile nearly every single day. He's super fun. And you guys should all follow Brant and try to convince him to do a show on LEAH, because we want to give him a spot. And I'm thankful for Doorknob Head for always being funny, and Raging Atheists, and like Purple and Eerie Fairy, for following me over here and giving me a chance. I love seeing you in the chat. There's so much to be thankful for. And even though the story was like, ugh, I come away from it even more hopeful that we can learn from our mistakes, and that, you know, when there is tyranny going on anywhere, it's a danger to us everywhere. So we have to say something. You know, Ryan over at The Last American Vagabond, ask him why he does what he does, because he has to. He has to. He recently said, I took a couple days off and I feel like they're getting away with it. Like, I wasn't here to tell you guys what they're doing, but I feel like they're getting away with it. And, you know, he reaches 600 sometimes in chat at one time, sometimes 3, but always over 3. And those people share it with people, and they share it with people. And these things are so important. So I am super grateful and super thankful that I have a noggin to learn with, and that I get to share it with you guys, and you guys show up to listen to me. Like, what? I have an audience. It's amazing, and I'm super thankful, and I appreciate all of you for spending your Fridays with me. And I love you guys so much. And stay humanist, for God's sake.